Welcome to the Greatness Garage Podcast, the place where small businesses get big answers. I'm your host, Brad Borkus, founder of Epitome Coaching Consulting, and with me is Jim Keener, entrepreneur extraordinaire. This is a different kind of podcast to get a different kind of results. Our mission is to serve you, the listener, to allow you to be the greatest business owner you can be. Hey everybody, welcome to the Greatness Garage. We're so happy to have you again. We are excited today. We're going to get a little bit of legal, political perspective today to give us an insight on how should we use our politicians, right? How should we properly leverage? How should we connect with them? How should we use the system in a way to create great things? And today we have Greg Lemhouse, and we're so excited. Jim, tell us a little bit about Greg.
Okay, Greg is he's a lobbyist, a former politician, comes from the background of law enforcement, and I thought it would be interesting to have him on board and just explain his interface on how he works with small businesses. And he's actually somebody that we had hired to work with a pipeline issue that we were dealing with in the state of Oregon. And Greg brought a lot of insight from his perspective at both being a politician and his law enforcement background. And so we merged those together, and we're now looking to steer policymakers and drive our agenda through the front door of the policymakers. And the liaison in that situation is Greg Lemhouse. And so I'd like to introduce Greg Lemhouse from U.S. Strategies. Is that the name of the company, Greg?
United Strategies.
United Strategies. So Greg, take it from here.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. Excited to be here. Yeah, I am a lobbyist. That's part of what I do. What I really try and make clear to people when I work for an organization or an individual is really I'm a problem solver, and lobbying is one of those things that I do to help solve problems. I'm a registered lobbyist here in Oregon. You have to register with the state if you're going to represent an organization or a business to lawmakers. But there's other functions I serve with business owners and organizations to kind of help steer them through the morass of government sometimes. A lot of folks go about their day, their business, their organization, and they really have never had to interface with government. They don't know where to begin, if there's an issue, where to start, and how to go through it. So sometimes it's simply guiding them through the process, connecting them with the right people so they can get the answers they need, to try and use the relationships that I've built to try and help them, get answers they want. But sometimes, it's really not getting the answers they want as much as it is informing them as early as possible so that they can make a timely decision, which is, I think we'll probably get into it, but I think it's a real important thing for businesses to understand that sometimes it's not really influencing the decision as much as it is getting advanced intel, if you will, from the law enforcement days, so you can make a great decision ahead of time and even beat your competitors to market.
Wow, that's phenomenal. And I love what you said, it's about understanding sometimes versus convincing or changing our response. And I think, unfortunately, too many times as small business owners, when we decide to go to the level of engaging our politicians, it's when we're pissed, right? Like they shut down our road, they put on a law or something that's confined our business, and we're mad. So let me ask that question first. If I want to start engaging my politicians, my representatives, what's the best way to do that before a problem shows up? What's the best way that you would say for somebody to do that?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And I think you're right. A lot of people get pissed and they want to jump on the email or they want to go pound on the door. I was in politics for 10 years on a city council. I could tell you, get in line. It's not effective. You got 100 people that are mad at you. Your voice gets lost. The key is doing what you said, which is understanding that everything in politics, and really in my book, everything is relationship based. And you build a relationship over time. And that has to start when you don't need something. If you go to somebody and want to build a relationship and want something from them right then, it sounds pretty hollow. They're not going to really be willing to listen to you. So my suggestion is first understand that you're in the political system. If you're a business owner, you're paying taxes, you're dealing with regulations, it's part of what you do. And I've got some great friends who have great businesses, manufacturers, employ lots of people. And I get frustrated with them when they don't seem to understand that politics is part of their job. It's one of the legs their businesses stand on. And you can have great accounting, great HR, great cybersecurity, but if you don't have a political strategy, you're missing out quite a bit. So go talk to your legislators early on, or hire someone to do it, to represent you, start building the relationship, and get them to understand what it is you do and who you are. What it is you do is important because you need to have an understanding of how a law may impact you. When I was sitting on a city council, I wasn't the expert of many things. But if I knew in the back of my mind that, oh yeah, my friend who owns a lumber yard, I know some of his issues, something pops up in a meeting, I can instantly recall, you know what, I should check in with my friend on this because this sounds like it might be a lumber issue I need to get some more information on. If you're ignorant to those issues, you make decisions thinking you're doing what's right, but you're really ignorant. You don't know what the effect that it could have on people that you care about or businesses you care about. So it's important to have that type of education up front. And then it's also important to build the relationship so they trust you. Again, these are people. And if they trust you and like you, they're a lot more willing to listen to you and be influenced by you when the time comes. They could also rely on you as a source of knowledge. And I've been able to do that with some clients. And it frustrates bigger organizations, bigger associations, because they're like, why does this one small outfit have more influence? Well, it's because I built a relationship with the lawmaker and they trust me and they trust them. So they'll ask us, what do you guys think? What should we do? What a great spot to be in when it comes time to building a law, to be able to tell the lawmaker what you think it should look like.
And I think, also for when I'm hearing this too, not only, so one of the things that you said that really struck me too was, as you're listening to it in your kind of job, you're listening to all the stuff coming through. And in my business in distribution in North Dakota, we did convenience and food service. So one that I was in, it was in tobacco legislation. We didn't, we didn't want additional taxes that suppress the business. So we had some conversations on that. And I mean, as you stepped into it, there was more flow of information and a lot of all this stuff going on. Like, how do I even get up to speed at this point? Yeah. And so I think for a small business one, I think sometimes the challenge is like, where do I start? And so if there's someone like yourself, or what's the best way to get the information disseminated to us of what we need to know, other than creating, certain relationships, what is the best way to navigate that?
Yeah, just have them call me.
So anyway, it's not always that easy,
guys. No.
Right?
No, but I mean, but you're hitting on some of the issues that I think a lot of people are scared of. It's kind of like when you were a little kid and your mom told you to clean your room and it was a total mess, at least mine was. And you'd walk in there and I didn't know where to start. You're just overwhelmed by it. Right?
Yeah.
That's what my job is. My job is to help people through that process. So what I would suggest business owners do, first off, know what your issue is. Know what you want to try and accomplish. Reach out to a local public affairs person like myself, or a lobbyist. They call themselves different names, and tell them, this is my business. These are what my current concerns are. Can you help me navigate this? And what my job is to peel away a lot of the noise and really focus in on that issue. And in every one of my clients' case, there's a lot of things going on that I will advise them of. Hey, something new's coming over around the left corner here. You need to be aware of this, but we're still working on this issue and we're still focused on this issue. The job of a good public affairs consultant really kind of cuts through the chase and gets them to understand what the most important issues are and brings to them decision points and some factors they need to help make their decision.
Wow. One of the things that I used lobbyists for in the past is as a steering committee. So I use them for two different issues. One is a sounding board and one is a steering committee. The sounding board is to get a little insight to the policymakers and kind of how they're feeling about a situation before I make a decision. And then once we make that decision, then I deploy the public affairs consultant to then steer our policy through that navigation, the waters, in order to get to the right players and to the decision makers. Another thing that Greg's really good at is identifying the obstacles and then developing course corrections and workaround schedules to be able to solve those problems. And in our situation that we're working on currently, we have a couple different projects in the pipeline, and one of them is a pipeline that is going through one of the properties. And so he's working at that level, on the state level, and then the national level there. And then on some of these other projects that we're working on, he's working at the local level on up through the state level. And so with his connections, he can travel and he can deal with other consultants around the world that are more positioned. And in addition to that, he gives access to these policymakers that you wouldn't ordinarily have. And so it's a win-win situation for small business people such as myself.
Thanks. And I think that's a good description of it too. I kind of see it as what I am too, as a force multiplier, which is kind of you're describing. You're a small business or a medium-sized business. You don't have to bring on staff to do all these things, and you don't have the time to build a relationship with this outfit or that politician or this lawmaker. That's what I do. And so you can go about your business. I know what our goals are. I will get that lawmaker in front of you for that time period so you can effectively state your case one-on-one with them, and then they're gone. And then you can get back to your business. The issue that Jim and I are working on, the pipeline itself, that's a great example of my job to reach out to the pipeline folks, build a relationship, spend my time building that relationship with them so that Jim doesn't have to. So that when they come into the room and we're literally sitting at the table, we're all friends. Me and these guys are buddies, right? We're all in a good relationship. And so Jim can get down to business. And you can really work through issues a lot quicker that way if you've got a good relationship built up. And it takes time. And business owners and CEOs just oftentimes don't have the time to do that effectively, unless that's their role, and oftentimes it's not.
Yeah, can you imagine to try to put that on top of many? Like I said, unless your company is in an industry where that's just there's a lot of that going on. But we've got so much time that we want to spend, especially small businesses, right? Our time is spent so much in our business. We're barely trying to get above water to work on our business. So one of the things that, as you talk about that ability to connect that leverage, what about as we go through the ranks? Like, it's funny when people talk about the presidential this and presidential that, and I say, I'm interested, but I care a lot more about who my city alderman is, who my, my regional, who my state representatives, what is the way that you think that you would suggest to build that kind of relationship? Because I think sometimes you get this Democrat Republican kind of, do you stay in those veins, or do you follow by who has kind of, that you connect with? What's the best way to connect and build honest relationships like that organically if you're doing that?
Well, I think the key word that you said is honest. That's how I go about it. Be honest and upfront with who you are and what you want to accomplish. I'm a registered independent because I like to be able to work both parties. It's been important to me throughout my career to be able to stand on principle, be a problem solver at the local level, and that's what I think local politicians should be. But it also allowed me to build relationships in both parties, and so I can work within each one of them. I think a really effective strategy or a real effective public affairs consultant can work vertically and work horizontally. So vertically, I can go local, state, federal. I can move up the chain if I have to solve a problem, but I can also move down and push some downward pressure from the federal representatives, maybe down to a local representative if I need to, but I can also go laterally into each party. It just depends on what needs to be done at the time. You can kind of call on your available menu of resources, but you only do that, again, through working through well-built relationships, lots of cups of coffee or beer, a lot of time, and a lot of honest helping each other out. A lot of people don't understand that there are a number of times where lawmakers and their staffs, and that's something when I say lawmakers, you should assume staff, because you work with the staffs a lot, will reach out to myself and other lobbyists or public affairs consultants for our help, because they can't communicate effectively to the other side. They need to have an issue, voiced a certain way. They can't talk to certain people. We work together quite a bit to accomplish them. And so with that comes, hey, remember last time I helped you on this, I need your help on this issue now. And so you build that trust and that relationship through real honest interaction. I'll tell you this, in the movies it plays, the character of the lobbyist as being the lying, scheming, cheating kind of person. But if you do that, you may work once, but you'll be out of the business. Most associations won't even let you stay in if you're caught lying as a lobbyist. If you lie to a staff member or lie to a lawmaker to get something, your credibility is destroyed. They'll never work with you again. It's just not worth it. You're much better off being honest and upfront. That's a great point.
So I've got a question. So you tap beautifully into the stigma, right? And so politics is just about money and lying and two-facing. Can we dispel that? Like, what is it, and why do you think that comes up, and what's the honest truth?
Yeah, I'd love to dispel it, but I can't.
I was gonna say the same thing.
Moving
We're
on.
checking honesty right now. Let's see if he
Yeah.
tells the truth about it. Because
It's like any industry. You got your good actors and your bad actors. You've got
Yeah.
people who, I think the majority of lawmakers are true problem solvers. They
Yeah.
really do want to help. I think in this day and age, you get into a real polarized perspective of things where it's you're either with me or against me, and I think that's unfortunate. But I think most lawmakers at the local, state, federal level want to solve a problem. Sometimes they have a different way of getting there, but their core, they want to get to the same thing. You do have a slice that are just political in nature. You know, they really are manipulative. It's all about them moving up the ladder, them doing things. It doesn't mean you can't work with those people to accomplish something. You just have to look at it from a different perspective. Whereas the one, kind of a true believer lawmaker, it's about educating them as to what the ripple effects are going to be from their decision, what your business does, the impact it'll have. And a lot of times just educating them gets them to go, okay, yeah, I need to take a different view of that because that's important.
Yeah.
The other folks you deal with, you're also educating them, but you're educating them in a way to say, you know, this is who I represent. If this goes poorly for them, you're not going to have their support anymore. And they can figure out in their own minds the political calculations of that. How many votes is that? What do those protests look like? What do those letters look like? Conversely, that this really helps my, association, whoever I'm working with out, they'd be really supportive of you and what you're trying to do. Again, they're making the political calculation. So it's really kind of working through that. Yeah, there's bribes and yeah, there's nasty stuff going on, but you get reports of that. When that stuff happens, it makes big news and it ends careers. So
Yeah.
I would say, just like in any industry, there's your bad apples, but the vast majority would rather be above board. They can be aggressive and they can be pushy. It can be a lot like the floor of a stock market where people are pushing really hard to get what they want. But in the end, you're going to go have a beer, a glass of wine afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah, that's tough to believe because there's such a lot of times divisive issues that it's their job, and while and their job is to fight hard for whatever the position is that they're at, isn't it?
You got to advocate hard for your client. I mean, you still have to have a principled center, and there are things I will not advocate for. I think everyone's got that line, but if it's legal, if it's moral, if it's ethical, and I don't have a problem with it personally, I can argue that side. If I'm representing a client and advocating for them, that's my job. And most people in this business don't take it personally. That's just us doing our job. We don't have to cross a personal line. I can be an asshole if I want to, but it's not that effective. Jim and I have talked about this before. Guess how many tickets I didn't write when a guy was being an asshole to me? A small number.
Yeah.
It rhymes with zero.
Yeah.
It's not that effective. I mean, there are people going in there and pounding the desk and threatening them. It just shuts them off, really. Just be persuasive, be kind, be open, and educate them. And when it comes to dealing with other lobbyists, you really need to have a long-term view of it. You could be opposed to them on an issue now, and later on you could be with them. I've personally experienced that on literally a minute-to-minute basis, where me and another lobbyist are waiting for the other one to finish their meeting so I can argue against him. And then as soon as we finished up that meeting, he and I went down the hall and argued together in favor of another issue. It's just part of the job.
That's right. Hired guns. Exactly. That's exactly the way we use lobbyists. We use them as a penetration point to identify people that are in line with our views that we could support and people that are opposing our views that we have to oppose. And so when we identify those people, then we work to build consensus and direct our message specifically to them. And we steadily drip our message to them. And then the follow up and follow through, and the driver is Greg, to make sure that our position is getting in front of the right players and that it's being presented properly. And then on the backside, we start looking at other ways to apply pressure. And so we start supporting the people who are in line with us and opposing those others. And then you can do that financially. You can do that using the press. You can use press releases. So there's a lot of ways to steer this in order to get a predictable outcome. And so that's the way that we choose to use our relationship with Greg and ours.
And I do really encourage, businesses that think they're too small to make an impact. That's not accurate, not in my view. If you build a relationship, one person can have a big impact on a senator, a state legislator, a local politician, if you build a strong relationship with them. We have a saying, I think it was a Midwest senator or congressman that came up with it, but it's so true. When it comes to the lawmaking process, you're either at the table or you're on the menu. If you're not paying attention to what's going on, your interests are going to get tossed under. And I've got examples to where, had I not been watching, clients would have been hurt. They'd have been irrevocably damaged. That we're able to fix that because we were paying attention. Or laws that passed that people had no clue of. You know, the biggest case I can give you is that a couple of years ago, the Oregon legislature, it became legal for nurses to do vasectomies.
Yes.
My sister's a nurse. I love nurses. Got nothing against nurses, but
if you're a urologist, though, that's going to change your business structure quite significantly, isn't it?
Yeah. All of a sudden they go, wait a minute, hold on. Now I'm competing with a whole nother subset of individuals here. So there's a lot of competing interests going on. And if you don't at least have somebody watching your interests, you could be damaged and not even know it. Even if you're part of an association, which I know a lot of my clients are, and it's great to be part of associations, but keep in mind, that association may not have your particular interests in mind. It may be looking at a broader scope, or it could be looking at the population center. Every state has population centers out in Texas. It could be looking at, if you're in Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, you've got more influence than the same industry out in Odessa or whatever.
Yeah.
So you want to be part of the association, but you also want your own representation.
That's a great point. And you know, one of the things that you were saying earlier that kind of brought me back in was, you know, I said if the first time you walk up to somebody with a handout or a fist pounding on the desk, you ain't going to get this up. What is a good way, a good olive branch to bring in, a good gift to bring in, a good way to approach someone in a servant manner? Not a financial, right? Like not a little package, you know, a little envelope, but I'm saying from a servant position that says, how can I can help you this way? What's a good way people can help politicians?
You know, really is understanding where they're coming from. That's why I think former politicians, I could go so many ways with that and get in trouble, but I think former politicians are really effective lobbyists and public affairs consultants because we've been on the other side of it. I know it doesn't work. Like I said, I know for me, if you come making threats and pounding my email box with the same thing over and over again, you move me further away. If you come begging and pleading your case and like this is the biggest thing in the world and overstating it, you're pushing me away. I look at it like this. I think I know lawmakers are very crunched for time. They've got a million people talking to them. They're doing this all day long. They're tired. They've got families. They're hungry. I like to get to the point. I like to be pleasant and quiet and just say, this is who I am. This is who I represent. This is the issue I'd like to talk to you about. These are our main concerns. Do you have any questions or is there anything I can do for you? Really get to it. To me, if they give me 15 minutes, I'm going to take 10 because I want them to feel like, oh, this guy gets it. He respects my time. And most of the time it goes 30. The other thing you can do is if you understand their people is do the research, scout them. You know, I'm a coach too. I'm a football coach, so I scout.
Nice.
Also a guy that worked, intelligence operations, so I get intel. I scout these people out. And if they're a former police chief, I don't call them lawmaker, I call them chief. They love it. You know, former police chiefs love being called chief. And all of a sudden it opens up and we share stupid police stories for 30 minutes and we have a 15-minute meeting. If they're into other things, you know, be aware of that. And you might even say, hey, you know, I know that your daughter dances. I just left my daughter's dance recital. And, you know, whatever kind of an opener you might think about to get them to relax and build that personal connection can be effective too. Asking other lobbyists what kind of people they are. Maybe there's certain things they want and make sure you hit that. But again, the key is understanding where they're coming from and what's going to be effective and making you influential. I think is being a considerate professional to their time and what they're trying to do. It really is not effective, I don't think, to build a huge sob story or pound on the table. I always go back to, you know, driver's side. If you cried, I wrote you a ticket. If you flirted with me, I wrote you a ticket. If you yelled at me, I wrote you a ticket. The people I most often write tickets to were the folks that were just honest, upfront, you know, treating me like a normal person. I think that's just an emotional response people have in general.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth? Just be honest. I get. It's funny that just hits so so nicely for us. I think that just be human with them, connect, and then like you said too, like don't it isn't about getting it all out at once. It's about respecting their time, making a way that they remember you, that connection, that story that says, oh, that's the guy who's a football coach, or that guy's the guys who his daughter does, you know, making the connection and then being succinct to the point, bullet points. Here's what it is. Yeah.
It's
You know, one of the things,
really
one of the things that I did when me and Greg started working together in a specific area that he wasn't interested in nor had worked in the past was start the process of dripping information to him and getting him more inquisitive on what we were discussing before asking him to go and take that message further. And so we were talking about using psilocybin in the veteran space, and how I felt with my two boys both being combat veterans who benefited from participating in the microdose study. I felt that I saw such a significant improvement in both the boys' life that we have to do something about it. And so when I reached out to Greg coming from law enforcement, knowing psilocybin is illegal, of course, the first thing he thought was, okay, you know, we don't want to get into this magic mushroom thing. But then as he started to realize what I realized, that there was a path forward. Can you hear? Can you hear, Greg?
No, yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought you. Then I started just giving him information. And then as he started to investigate it further, then he started to understand that there is a path forward, providing that we change the law, or providing we find people that are looking to move in that direction as well. And so even though his initial response was accurate, through this process of education, he is now understanding that there's a path forward, and he has since found other policymakers who agree that there's a path forward, and we're going to start working to make that happen. So that goes from starting with something that is completely illegal to looking for a penetration point, to educating the populace, educating the politicians, educating the lobbyists. The lobbyist takes that knowledge, improves it 1, 2, 3, 10%, introduces it to the right policymaker. The policymaker then reaches out and says, what kind of constituent group are we looking at? Is it large enough? Is it a political voting bloc? Is it a problem if we don't look at this? And then you have other outside agencies looking and, you know, picking away. And so my process is to start, to crawl, to walk, to run, and to bring in players that are key players that have the ability to impact these policymakers and move the ball forward. And we believe that we'll be successful in 2021.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point that we haven't quite hit on, but I think it's crucial to it. It's also, sometimes you need to be incremental. It's understanding what's the goal, and the goal can change over time. But psilocybin's a great point, and we saw this in recreational marijuana. There are people that were so supportive of it and so passionate about it, they wanted it all at the same time. Whereas I always go back to the old the movie Colors, where Robert Duvall's talking to Sean Penn, you know, and he's a young cop. He wants to run in there and do everything. And he said the old story about the bulls, 2 bulls standing up on a ridge. He says, let's go down there and get one of them cows. Let's run down there and get one of them. And he said, no, let's walk down there and get them all.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you can push too hard on these laws and you push people away.
Yeah.
So we believe with the psilocybin's a great point. We have to slowly get people on our side without scaring them off, getting them to understand the value of it, making it a way that is embraceable, and then slowly taking it further and further as people are more comfortable. If you try and shame people into saying, oh, we need to do this right now, or you're a terrible person, you try and get emotional about it right away and go for the whole kit and caboodle, you'll probably risk losing it all. And even if we have to settle for 25%, we'll go back for 28 next time. We'll keep building until we have 100. Correct.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks. You'll see a lot of this stuff, and you guys are probably, it probably resonates with what I'm saying, because in a sense, what we do is we sell. We sell ideas, we sell people, we sell perspectives, and the practice of selling something and convincing someone to invest or convincing him to vote for you, and it's really all the same stuff. It's relationship building and the process you go through.
Yeah, and you know, even talking, it was kind of interesting, Jim, to hear you talk about your process that you're going through there, because not only do you have to understand your process, but you have to also understand your process from a less emotional perspective, so that you can communicate it from a factual standpoint. so that other people can absorb and understand it from whatever their perspective is. But that's an interesting thing. Instead of somebody going, oh, this is the most horrible thing. Like, Greg, I think earlier you were saying, this is how it affects my constituents or the people that I represent, and here's how it will affect, and here's the, people kind of understanding the cause and effect, and just really understanding that there is a law of unintended consequences, and being okay with that and understanding it's a discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a time
Brad,
for the emotional play. But I could tell you, my style is not that very much. I like to be a quiet professional. I like to work behind the scenes. I like to have conversations that are not threatening with lawmakers and individuals I need to influence. I want them to be in a good headspace to trust me. And I want them to know that I'm not going to embarrass them, and my clients aren't going to embarrass them. There are times where it's appropriate to do a letter writing campaign or to do some type of show of support. But I tell you, my read of it, the 30 years I've been tracking politics and the 20 years I've been involved in it, is protests are so common now. It's so easy to get, outraged. It just happens all the time. I think they've lost their effectiveness. I really do. I mean, I remember, people protesting the council chambers and saying, look, everybody here wants this. And me having to point out, okay, that's 200 people. That's less than 1% of our population. Not everybody wants this. Over time, it loses its effectiveness.
I think that you're right on with about being an educator, because effectively, I think more than sales skills, it's educational skills. It's literally educating them properly. And, in this case with the psilocybin was a similar support. When I realized that we had the veteran community, we had the intellectual community, that the majority of these people microdosing were engineers. These are people that used to be on Adderall and opioid dependent individuals looking to get off opioids, and they moved towards psilocybin. I never thought that was a gateway to get out of something. I always thought that was the gateway to get into something. Yeah. And I had never done the research and thought that, hey, these people are looking to use this drug to get off of opioids, can't even say it, and less to get on to something else, because, we've been taught that everything's a gateway. So marijuana is a gateway to all these other things, when in fact that turned out not to be true. And then to look that there's a gateway to get out of something, that where pharmaceutical companies are making billions of dollars pushing these painkillers, and then these people can't get off of them. And so I invested in a company called MindMed out of Canada, one of the early round investors, and we're working to develop the pharmaceutical side of things. And so on that side, in the Canadian market, we're looking to use the psilocybin-based psychoactive drugs to get people off of opioids, and we're in the clinical trials now to start moving down that path. And then on the natural side, the nutraceutical side, we're looking at how we can get more access to psilocybin-based therapeutics to deal with the PTSD, to deal with the anxiety, and to deal with the emotional trauma that a lot of our soldiers are dealing with by being deployed nearly 14 years at war. I think we're going on 16 years at war now. And so, I'd never been that interested in it until my children were both affected by it. And then we started doing these trials, and they had migraine medicines, and then they put them on a ketamine trial, which is a horse tranquilizer. And then they were looking at all these other opportunities on what we could do to get these kids help. And we participated in the psilocybin study, and I saw the benefits immediately. And now we have an entire veteran community that has been microdosing illegally for a long period of time, some up to 3 years, illegally breaking the law, and they found tremendous relief. And so they're coming to me saying, hey, Pops, what could we do? We don't want to be criminals. They all run organizations. They all do very well in the community, and they're all on psilocybin. Now, not enough of a dose to affect the psyche, but enough of the dose to help minimize the pain and the symptoms associated with traumatic brain injury and TBI. So they used to take these migraine drugs that would just wipe them out. And so your brain is gone and you're gone. And then when you're off of it, then you have to recover and come back. But if you want to escape, there's different mind drugs that they're giving these kids that are for migraines, that what they do is they wipe you out. And so you don't have the headache and you're not dealing with the symptom, but you're also not productive and you're not available intellectually. So, I don't have all the answers. Matter of fact, I think I have way more questions than answers. But when I reached out to Greg, Greg was open-minded. He listened to what I had to say. I didn't tell him, here's what you need to do. I said, here's what I'm trying to accomplish. Here's the situation. Let's listen to my story. And then he took it. He made it his. He started to understand. He started to do his research, and he started to navigate a path forward for us. And at no point in time did he said, I love psilocybin. I'm involved. I'm going to take this to the promised land. He said, crawl, walk, run. Let's reach out. Let's find some players who may be interested or may, not be opposed. And let's start working down those paths. And so for a small business out there that's wondering how in the world do you use a lobbyist or a public affairs consultant to accomplish an objective, that is the roadmap that I'm using. Greg is participating in that. We're paying the bill, and we're going to get the predictable outcome because we believe not only are we in the right, but I think we have a path forward with the right players. And whether he agrees with me or not, he shows up and he does his work on a regular basis, and we have incremental progress that we're looking forward to.
Right.
Greg, one thing that, just with Jim saying that gets me, so like, how do you use a lobbyist? How do you use, a public, that understands this? And one thing that came into me is with anything, what scares me is what I don't know, I don't know. And so if somebody wanted to engage you and said, here's the business I'm in, and what could possibly politically or ever affect me, how do you help them walk down with going, what you don't realize is that it's a light breeze, but the winds of change might be coming or are starting to blow in this direction. How do you help them through? Like, can they have a sit down with a strategic? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, and I would encourage them to do that, and they shouldn't be paying for it either, by the way. I mean, a good public affairs consultant is going to sit down and say, these are the threats you're facing. In fact, you could do a fairly quick SWOT analysis, and that's what I would typically do, is a free SWOT analysis to say, these are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that your business is facing. I could probably do one fairly quickly for many industries because we deal with them all the time, like manufacturing and things like that. But you want to walk them through of these things, the threats they're facing, the opportunities, how they could deal with them, the options available to them. But it's important to not overwhelm them. And the psilocybin issue is a good point of it. When we go sell this to lawmakers, we could sell it in a million different ways. But to me, you focus on opioid abuse and veterans issues. Those are two really big issues. A lot of people can resonate with them. You move forward with those. So if I'm talking to a business, I'm going to find out what are your biggest concerns, and then I'll do the research on the legislation or the regulation which may affect them, and then present to them some strategies going forward that could help them strengthen their business. And some of it might be, like I mentioned earlier, is just knowing ahead of time. We talk about lawmaking, but regulation is just as important. And there's a lot of unelected officials who make regulations that affect your business that you can affect if you know how to do it by getting a hold of the right agency. So one of the things I try and impart to potential clients is the importance of understanding what's going to happen. Nothing happens quickly in politics, as you can tell most of the time. And so you can find out if you've got a good relationship with the right legislatures who sit on the right committees or the right agency people, it looks like this is going to happen. And I can go back to a business member and say, maybe you're not in the changing the rules part of the game. You don't want to make new laws or change laws, but you want to know what's going on. I'll be able to tell you as soon as I can what we think is going to happen, what we believe it's going to look like, and the timeline. So you might know a full business quarter in advance what's going to happen. You can start making changes. You can prepare for it. You can do all kinds of different things. And your competitors are going, what the hell is Jim doing that for? And then when Q3 hits, they go, and they read it in the paper, they go, oh shit, that's what he was doing. Okay, and it's because Jim had the intel. That's why that was happening. So that alone, I think, is valuable to businesses. It's really understanding what their need is and what their concerns are. And if there isn't a real specific concern, then I would tell them you need to know what's going on. To be ignorant of an entire section of society that affects your business, affects the livelihoods of you and your coworkers and the people who work for you, and I think that's dangerous.
I agree. And I'll tell you another thing that's missed is that all large businesses have public affairs, and they also have their lobbying organizations. Every large business. small businesses miss out on that. And so we're always last to find out, last to know. We're last in the chute. 9 times out of 10, you're late to the game. And what I found is by being proactive, when I explain our relationship, how I work, why I do what I do, you'd be amazed on how many small business goes, man, I got to have that. I got to figure that out. I got to find a guy to do that, because they don't know. They think, hey, what are you doing with Lemhouse for? What does that have to do with what you're doing? Well, they don't realize what we're actually doing. They think, oh, he's over here. There's a problem. There is no problem. Actually, he's not dealing with the problem. He's dealing with communication with people, access to people. He has relationships with people that he can get answers, and sometimes he can drive policy. But more than that, he has access. He has his finger on the pulse, and he has his ear to the ground. So he hears when it's spoken, and he says, hey, you might be interested in this. So I don't have to monitor that. I have to pay a fee each month to have access, and then I get feedback. And then when there's an issue that he thinks we should know about, he lets us know. When there's some opportunity that he sees, then he can say, hey, have you guys considered this? And so he's actually bird dogging opportunity at the same time that he's defending your ass. And a lot of people don't understand that that's a two-edged street here. That's a two-way street. They think it's just one or the other. They don't realize that it's both. And so he could see potential opportunity by being involved that nobody else has seen, because it's being formulated as we speak. And because he's there and he's present, he has access to that information. And also, he knows when something's going to come to an end and when to wind something down. It doesn't look like this is going to be a viable opportunity. And he also fights on the side of business, and he'll, with new taxes, and there's always some new something coming down the pipeline that will be told about, like, hey, have you guys heard that this may affect you? Well, that's not what we hired him for. That has nothing to do with what we're working on, but it's tremendously important to our business. So there's more than one reason to use the public affairs consultants or the lobbyists and put them on your payroll as part of the employees. By being an outside consultant, they're part of the independent contractor base that people at the larger businesses over 500 employees typically have 1, 2, or 3. And with him, a lot of us small businesses can share that one person. So it's cost prohibitive for us.
Well, and one thing that you said there, that Jim, that really kind of, I listened to it and I heard it this time in a different way, is steering. And when we're talking about steering, a lot of times we're thinking, oh yeah, like what legal things should I avoid, or what political things coming up are going to problem. But what about the winds of change of opportunity and a sales steering consultant that says, hey, they're opening up a new branch of this, they're opening up a new of this. There's all these opportunities. So from a steering side, I heard that in a whole new way. Kind of listening to you talk on what you've gone through. And the other thing, Greg, that I was sitting over here and my mind's actually starting to melt a little bit, because when you said unelected officials, I just went, oh, there's so much experience I've had with unelected officials that you've had to deal with. And back in my home state of North Dakota, in my hometown of Minot, they've had a lot of changes happen in theirs, and they actually just let go of their city manager. And that city manager was difficult to work with, and he's held up a lot of real estate development that's happened in the area. And, just going, and he was an unelected official, but I will tell you one thing, I could have talked with any elected official and it wouldn't have helped very much, because that guy was in the way. And I started thinking about that going, holy crap, I should have an entire strategy, or a company should have an entire strategy working with the unelected officials. I'm not going to say more, but maybe almost as much as the elected officials that affect your industry. Yeah. Wow.
I would say at least as much, and sometimes more. I mean, it really depends on what you do. But if you're a person who works with land use quite a bit, zoning, an individual planner, a senior planner at a city can be all that matters. For whatever reason, the structure of that city, they don't have a strong enough planning director, whatever it might be, this senior planner is the person who can make or break you. Yeah. And so to have a relationship to work through that is really, really important. And find a public affairs person who has a history with certain cities where they know people, they've got relationships, they can work with certain individuals, or they know how to work around them given that organization. State agencies. Yeah, there are commissioners and there's other individuals that are appointed that are extremely powerful, and that really should be top of mind for a lot of your public relations or public affairs people to deal with that. Yeah, I tripped up and said public relations because one thing I was talking about that I haven't really mentioned, I was thinking about it, was the difference between public relations and public affairs. And a lot of people get those caught up a little bit, and Jim kind of touched on it. My job is not to spin the truth for you. My job is to tell you what the truth is to look at the lay of the land. Politics has an effect on everything. And so whatever is happening at the national scene, the state, or the local scene, my job is to evaluate it and tell Jim and my other clients, this is what you're dealing with. This is how it's going to, I believe it's going to affect your business. These are the opportunities you have. And some of the clients don't like to hear it, but it's not the job of the public relations consultant or the public affairs consultant to be a PR machine and try and spin it a certain way. That's your job. You have PR people for that, marketing people for it. My job is either to point out potential opportunities, potential obstacles. I can provide some strategies of how we're going to deal with that, but ultimately it's your choice about what you want to do. And I think a good public affairs consultant does that. The other, I think, bonus that you have by working with a public affairs consultant is you have the NDA. You've got contractual agreements with them where they're an outside person, but they get to know you really well. You know, you develop a strong personal relationship with them. They understand your business. There are times you want to bounce something off of them, and they'll give you honest feedback, and they can't tell anybody about it. You know what I mean? So it's another kind of an additional way to use that outside person who understands what you're trying to do and say, you know, what do you think about this? And they give you their advice, give you their perspective.
And I believe that Steel Assignment is a great example. I mean, we have an illegal product that who do you go to? You go to the cops and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, and they say, I'll arrest you. So who do you go to, right? You go to the politician and you go, hey, I'm thinking about, I'd like for you guys to consider this. And now am I conspiring to commit a crime because I'm asking him if he would consider it? And so there's a fine line to navigate in something like this where people aren't aware of how to do that. And so how do you have that conversation? How do you get that introduction? How do you present your argument without it being viewed as, oh, you're trying to skirt the crime, or you're trying to do A, B, C, D? And the best way to do that is to have an open-minded conversation with somebody you trust, get their honest, objective feedback. They know the lay of the land. They know the personalities of the players. They say, hey, maybe this guy over here who's been favorable in the past to A, B, C, and D, maybe he's interested, or maybe she's interested, and I'll reach out to her because I'd spoken to her about this. And then what you find is he does that introduction and said, hey, have you guys considered anything like this? Have you guys looked in this direction? I have a client that's interested in this, and here's what he's thinking. Is that something you guys would consider? And just by having that conversation, it reaffirms our position. It affirms his position as a liaison, an intermediary, to start that conversation. By having that conversation, it steers us through.
That's awesome. Well, Greg, you have provided us a ton of information, and we've just been sponges over here. We love it. I hope the audience has gotten a ton out of this, because if you're listening, there's so much value. Greg, if somebody has some specific questions, they'd love to reach out to you or engage you, what's the best way to connect with you?
You know, just send me an email. My company's name is United Strategies out of Oregon, but my email would be Greg, Greg, at ustrategies.org.
Okay.
Greg,
org, make sure you note the org, okay?
Right. Shoot me an email. Let me know what your issues are. If I can't help you, if you're in an area of the country that I can't help you, I'm happy to refer you and try and connect you up with somebody that can.
That's awesome. Well, and everybody, if you want to reach out to Jim, Sonic Solutions, right? We can connect up with you that way.
Correct. SonicSolutions.com. Easiest way to access me.
Wonderful. And if you guys want to talk to me, you have questions for me, go to callwithbrad.com. We're so happy to serve you. Greg, again, so very gracious that you came and shared your wisdom with us. Until next time, everyone, thank you all, and have an amazing, amazing day.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks all.
Guys.
Bye.